Finally, I'll turn it over to Laura Taylor, the Assistant Professor of Education Studies at Rhodes College.
Hey, thank you, Johnny, and thanks everybody for coming and for sticking around. So, like Johnny said, my name is Laura Taylor. Just to give you some context on what I'm going to be talking about, I'll talk very briefly at the end about some ideas on how we get our kids writing through the holidays. But I think that we've heard a bunch of ideas that were fantastic. So, what I want to talk about is a little bit on what we've learned from educational research on why kids writing helps them become better readers and why it's okay if when they're writing, they're not spelling everything correctly. So, a lot of this work is coming out of a collaboration with Dr. Aissa Marchand, who is an educational psychologist at Rhodes College and is working with me on a research project that is seeking to learn in part from what parent perspectives on their children's, particularly in K through 3 literacy instruction in Shelby County schools. So I'll make a plug for that at the end. But if you're at all interested in participating in, say, a 1-hour interview for a $25 gift card, we'd love to learn from you. I'll put that contact information at the end. But myself, I was formerly a elementary school teacher. I am now a professor in educational studies where I teach courses in literacy. I research how parents and teachers can best support their children in early literacy. And perhaps most importantly, I am parent of 2 kindergartners at Idlewild Elementary. So that's where I'm coming from. One of the things I just want to start off by saying is I, as a parent, even though I do this for my job, can very easily get overwhelmed with feeling like I need to be doing more and more to support my children's literacy. So I just wanted to start with the place of reminding ourselves that reading and writing are already part of our daily lives, and there's so much reading and writing we do, like filling out forms, like texting, like reading signs, that we don't even think about as reading. And even though it might not look exactly like the types of reading and writing our students are doing at schools, it draws on and develops the same skill set. To sort of start there by reminding ourselves of all the work that we as parents are already doing, so that we can feel good about that and build on that. And what I want to talk about today, kind of with this point of why I'm arguing it's okay that your kids are not spelling things correctly, is this notion of thinking about reading and writing and learning to read and write as code breaking. So we get a sense of what codes are, right? Codes are things like the Morse code that you can see in this image. It's just a way to connect a symbol to some kind of concept, and we do that all the time in our daily life. In fact, our kids are already probably pretty good at it. I know my children could recognize the McDonald's logo well before they knew that that made a sound. The Target logo, I bet I'm not the only one that could recognize that, or even on that Instagram screen, right? That little picture of a house is just a code that is telling you that you know the connection, that if I press that, that'll take me to my home screen. If I press the plus button, that will allow me to make a new picture, right? That's the kinds of code breaking that we are doing every day, and it's very, very similar to how children learn to connect letters and sounds, that code breaking that's at the base of learning how to read and write. And just to kind of concretize that, right? So there's nothing inherent in that first box. You can look at that and you can say, like, that's 2 lines. That it looks like, it might look like an X, right? But as you became a reader and a writer, you learned that that symbol reflected or represented a particular sound, right? That it makes the t sound. You learned that the middle box makes a sound. And then you also had to learn the more complex things, right? That if I put those 2 letters together, like in that third box, it's going to make a sound. So that's what we're talking about. Well, if you hear teachers talking about maybe decoding, I like to talk about it as code breaking. That's what we're talking about, right? These are the key things our students need to be doing really early in their literacy development. We're thinking around pre-K, kinder first, to get them reading and writing books independently. So, what do they need to be able to do to learn that code, right? It's two pieces. The first piece is that they have to know the letter sound connection, right? So they have to look at that first box and see that semicircle and know that it's not just a semicircle, but in this context, it also makes a k sound. And they need to know that for a bunch of letters, right? So here an a and a t. So that's one of the pieces that is key to code breaking. The second piece is that they need to be able to blend those sounds together and then conversely segment. What I mean by that is this, if I can tell the code, I know it's a k, a, t, but I need to be able to blend those words together into cat, cat, right? And if you have young readers, you maybe have seen them doing a version of that. And I spend time talking about this because I think it's helpful to remind ourselves what a complex process this process of learning how to read is, right? For most of us, we've been doing it for so many years, for decades, that we don't even realize how much work we're doing to make sense of just a simple word like cat. So when we think about this code breaking, we've got to match the symbol, like the little semicircle, to the sound. And then we've got to be able to blend those sounds together to make them into words. Okay, so that sort of takes me to why I think it's okay and, in fact, good if when your kids are reading and writing at home and writing, that they're not spelling everything correctly or conventionally. One of the reasons that that's true is just that the English language is really complex, right? We talked about the TH makes a sound. Well, in them, it can also make a th sound. And then you could also write the word time with a TH. Maybe you were cooking with that for Thanksgiving. And then time can also be spelled really differently. So that's one thing to just remember. And we are lucky to live in a world with things like dictionaries and spell check for those confusing words like that middle time that we might forget how to spell correctly every single time. But more importantly for our younger readers is that we can think about this spelling wrong not as mistakes or errors, but actually as evidence and practice of their developing knowledge of this code, right? And you can see here, someone talked about schedules as a literacy practice. This is a kid's weekly Christmas schedule of the things they're going to be doing, and a great example of the ways that you can integrate reading and writing into your writing. So, for me as a parent, it's really helpful to know. Okay, well, like it's okay for them to spell things wrong. What does that mean? When is it okay? When is it not? For me, it was really helpful to know what the research says about how kids progress from, say, just the very basics into the more conventional spelling we want them to be able to do in elementary. So I'm going to sort of walk you through that research, and you can kind of think about where you've seen your own children, perhaps where they might be in that stage, where they might be headed, and hopefully begin to see some of the I think brilliance of what your kids are already doing and how you can continue to develop that. So kids start with scribbling. And scribbling can just be scribbling like to draw, but research also suggests that young children will scribble in order to convey a message. This is a good friend of mine. I think her daughter was 3. This was her grocery list. And her lovely 3-year-old daughter, Lulu, added to it with those scribbles at the bottom. And the reason I say this is part of writing is when the mom asked her, what did you write on here? She wrote, she said to her mom, oh, I wrote, we need sprinkles. And so, what that represents is the very beginning of this child understanding that there is a code, right? That there's these symbols and they somehow connect to things in the real world, to words I know and to things I want. So, if I write sprinkles down up here, maybe I'll get some sprinkles, right? So, that actually it might not feel like it has anything to do with literacy, but it's actually really the starting basis of understanding this code. Then kids typically move into what we might call letter-like forms, like you can see here. They start to notice patterns, like there's a lot of straight lines in these symbols and a lot of curves in these symbols. And obviously, they're not really voicing this out loud, but this is kind of how their brain is processing it. And as they continue to develop, we might see things like letter strings. And these strings aren't connecting those letters and sounds yet. It's just that they've started to recognize letters and they're going to start to reproduce them in strings. And this might have said, I can't remember what Brian's piece specifically said, but this might have said something like, I love my friend Bob. But they're continuing to get that idea that these things represent words, right? And you'll see his name up at the top, right? This might also be when you see your kids starting to really recognize their names and the letters in their names start showing up more and more in their writing. But all three of these, right? The scribbling, the letter like forms, and the letter strings are things we usually don't even think about as having anything to do with literacy. But sort of now decades of research has suggested this is a pretty typical path that most kids are following that is showing their increased understandings of this code. And then for me, where it gets really exciting is what we might call phonetic spelling, or I like to think about it as invented spelling. It's where kids are sort of inventing, drawing on their existing knowledge of this code, of these letter sounds to spell new words. So that top one, if you want to be your own code breaker there, right? That one says, there once was a little girl. And you might be tempted to look at that and say, well, like, is that supposed to be good? There's very few words spelled correctly. But when we're thinking about reading and writing as first of all, a long process, one that really begins at birth and isn't fully developed for years and years. I mean, we aren't expecting kids to spell things kind of conventionally until 8 or 9 or 10 or maybe even later. This is a long process and this is showing us all the things that they already know. So take that first word, right? There. TAR. The air, right? They're beginning to notice that there are those multiple sounds and they're matching them up. I really like that bottom one. It's Pikachu likes to dance, right? Look at that word dance at the end. And yes, that kid is not spelling dance conventionally, DANCE, but he's really close to knowing that code, right? He's got the first part and he knows that the last sound is S, and he's representing that there. So again, part of why I talk us through this is that so we can see this invented spelling or this phonetic spelling not as a weakness or a problem that we need to fix, but rather as a good sign of their developing knowledge. And one other thing I'll say on that, right, is then we move towards conventional spelling. This is Colin, I think he was 7 when he wrote this. I accidentally threw my tooth away. I did not throw a tantrum. I didn't ask mom about the context of that story. But what I love about the writing is you might say, Laura, this isn't conventional spelling. Accidentally and throw or through are spelled incorrectly. And this is another piece of what I think is really powerful about allowing our kids to use invented spelling rather than requiring that they're always spelling it like quote unquote correctly or conventionally. Because words like accidentally are hard to spell. I'm not 100% sure that at 7 p.m. tonight I could spell the word accidentally for you. But Colin knows he doesn't have to be afraid of whether or not he can spell it correctly because he knows it's okay to invent that spelling. And so it encourages our students to use more complex, more vivid, more academic vocabulary, right? And still here he's reflecting his knowledge of the code, right? Accidentally. So what I want to sort of say with all of this and all of this research, right, is that first of all, right, like this is a fairly typical process. So you can start to pay attention to where your kids are right now in that development. And this really is a years long process that I just talked through in a couple minutes. But obviously, like kids can spend years in those first couple of stages, 3, 4, and into 5, where we might see them moving into more phonetic spelling. And then to begin to see and build upon what they already know. Okay, so briefly, there were so many great ideas already presented for how you can get kids writing. Cards, letters, wish lists. My kids spent a long time writing their Christmas wish lists, schedules, checklists. If you're going somewhere, make a checklist of stuff you got to pack. That helped me not forget my kids' toothbrushes this time. And then they can check it off. Signs and banners. We decorated our house last year for New Year's by making a sign that said Happy New Year's and connecting those letters. There's lots and lots of ideas of how you can do that. You heard so many tonight. And when we let go of this idea that all the words have to be spelled correctly, we make it a much less stressful experience for ourselves. And I think a much more, kids are much more likely to want to do on their own and to get excited about. And I'll close with one final thing about that, thinking about ways we can support emergent spelling. Because you might have kids like mine who really, really, really want to spell it the right way. Or sometimes I'll use the language of the way it's spelled in books. 3 ideas for you. One is sharing word lists with them. When my kids were younger, I would often write out those big words that I knew were going to be really hard to spell. Think about the holidays we're celebrating. Hanukkah, Christmas, Kwanzaa. None of those are easy words for 6 or 7 or 8-year-olds to spell. So I might make a list of the words that they're going to want to spell and give them that list and then let them figure out all the other words that they're going to spell. You might also, if your kids say in kinder, first, second, use those sight word lists that your teachers are sending home, or you can bug your teachers to send home respectfully, of course. You might also like to include things like letter sound charts that you can find all over the internet. I put a little clip of one in this image, right? So the kid's like, well, I want to make the ch sound. Well, that's a tricky one, right? But they can see the picture. Oh, chain, ch, right? But honestly, as a parent, I usually can't get my act together enough to do either of the first two. What I can do and what I want to say is really helpful is the third one, which is helping kids stretch out the sounds in words to help them hear them. So for example, go back to that basic cat word, right? If your kid says, "Mom, how do I spell cat?" You go, "Oh," instead of just telling them, right? Go, "Okay, well, what do we hear? Cat, cat," and really exaggerate it, and they'll hear that. Maybe they'll hear that k, and maybe they'll say K, and you'll be like, oh, it's not a K, it's a C. But maybe you actually just let them go with the K because that's another way to make the k sound and you're doing invented spelling. And then you go, okay, exaggerate it for them and walk them through that process. And that will help them continue to build their knowledge of that code. And over time, you'll see your kids starting to do that themselves, right? They'll start to sound it out. And that's exactly the process we want them to do so that they're getting a chance to not only read and write and maybe do something that is not demanding of our attention while we're trying to get ready for the holidays, but they're also developing that code that they're going to use for writing, but it's the same code, right, that we use for reading. So I hope that you found something helpful here. Thank you for sticking around and listening. And I just wanted to mention first, thank you. Um, my name is Laura Taylor. If you have any questions or comments, reach out to me. So it's Taylor, Taylorl, at Rhodes.edu. Sorry, it went down. The other thing is if you are a parent of a Shelby County Schools kid that's in grades K through 2 or K through 3, and you'd like to participate in a research study to tell us about your experiences with that, I would also love to hear from you. We are doing 1-hour interviews with parents, and we are thanking you with a $25 gift card. So please email me if you would be interested in setting up one of those interviews. Thank you so much, and thank you to Johnny and Cardell for hosting.
Laura, that was such an approachable and really enlightening explanation of how early literacy works. I definitely learned quite a few things. So thank you so much for that.